Hello everyone, I wanted to give you an update about my trip to PAX South, and sorry if I sound a little different, it's because I have this cough that I picked up there and it just won't go away. But once it does, I plan to get videos out a lot quicker. And of course the next video is going to be the Xperia Play review, so look out for that soon. Now on to PAX. I had a great time. It seems like every year I go, I just have more fun than the year before. So I'm definitely going to continue this tradition, and I think it's going to be like an annual pilgrimage for me. I played a lot of great games, met some developers, and I also tried the Nintendo Switch, so I'll tell you guys all about that. Let's start with Monster Boy. This is a highly anticipated indie game, sort of, kind of. It's like a retro series that's being brought back in like the indie style. The game looks gorgeous and it plays pretty well too. I only played it for about 15 minutes and it seemed really basic, at least from what I played, which was of course, the beginning of the game, but it kind of felt like a very easy, very watered down Metroidvania style game. I don't think it's for me, but I know it's a series that's very near and dear to a lot of Sega fans, so I think that they're in for a real treat, but I don't think it does enough to differentiate itself from other indie titles, so it's just not for me. But if you're a fan of the old series and you were looking forward to this game, then I don't think you're going to see a lot of problems with it. Next, I want to talk about Shrouded Isle. This is an indie game made by some of the same guys who made Moon Hunters. And of course, you guys know that I was a big fan of that game. However, this one leaves a lot to be desired. You could definitely tell that it's inspired by Moon Hunters, but it doesn't have any of the action, it just has a lot of the choices in it. And of course with Moon Hunters, I liked it that it had a lot of choices that you would make that would affect your stats and your gameplay, and even the story. But this one, it just seems to be those choices, and I'll be honest, when I was demoing it, I really didn't know what I was doing. So the gameplay isn't very clear, it seems to be almost kind of like a point and click, but not quite, like you don't go through a dialogue tree or anything. So I'm a little divided on this one, but it seems like the game is as well. Because Moon Hunters, I feel like it really worked with like the symbiotic relationship between the action and the actual narrative choices that you would make. And this one, it seems like it cut out all the action, so it doesn't really work well. The game just doesn't work, it's not fun. I always hate it when I'm a huge fan of a game, but I'm not a big fan of the studio's follow-up to it. But I just can't get any enthusiasm for this one. But I played some good games there too. One of them was Lightspeed Frontier. This is a 3D space shooter and it has a lot of exploration and gathering mixed in with it. When you defeat enemies, you could salvage parts from them. But yeah, so I really like this game. I think there are some other games that do the same thing, sort of. And now that I think about it, the reason might be because the premise is pretty much a 3D version of Captain Forever Remix. But I'm going to be looking forward to this one. It was a little buggy when I was playing it. I mean, I'll go ahead and forgive them for that because it's an early build. But I really want to see what this thing looks like when it's finished. I also spent a lot of time at the Vlambeer booth. That was so great. I got to meet Rami, who is one of the developers of Nuclear Throne. And he is the nicest guy in the whole fucking world. I had a great conversation with him. He's very approachable. Just an amazing guy. And I hear he's getting married too, so congrats to him. They also had this hourly competition where people would try to reach the Nuclear Throne. And there was this one contestant who did an epic fucking run. I mean, this guy, it was incredible. He was getting to parts of the game that I've never even seen. It just blew my mind. I need to get better at that game. And one of the craziest things is that they had like a merchandise booth right there. So I was checking out what they had and I saw the guy behind the desk had like an Nvidia Shield right there. And I've never played on one, so I was like, hey dude, can I try that out? And the guy says, yeah, sure, check out the game that I made. And I'm here thinking like, okay, the guy's working a merchandise booth, so his game, it's probably not going to be the best. He doesn't even have a booth here at PAX. I mean, the poor guy, he's just a little indie dev. But then he shows me his game and instantly I know what it is. And I say, dude, you're the guy who designed Love. So yeah, I met Fred Wood, the designer of Love, and he was working the merchandise booth over at Vlambeer. So yeah, the game that I played though was his follow-up to Love that's called Kuso. I also went to the Devolver Digital booth and it was a little disappointing actually. I played the game Minute, which is inspired by the design of Downwell, and I really like Downwell, but this one, it doesn't really play that well. The whole premise is that you have 1 minute to complete this game and you're on a countdown timer, but I couldn't really figure out what to do. I kind of figured that that's the point of it, that when you have a game that only lasts 1 minute, you're supposed to, explore and figure out how to do something, but it just bored me to death, so that was a little bit of a disappointment. But at the Tiny Build booth, I played an amazing fucking game. It's called Mr. Shifty, and it's incredibly fun. This is such a simple game. You just have 2 buttons and you have to clear the whole floor of enemies. That's it. One button attacks and the other one teleports you over just a little, even through walls. It is incredibly fun, it's very frantic, and the ragdoll physics are just great. This game was the biggest indie surprise for me at PAX. I'm definitely gonna buy it on day 1. I also tried out some more VR while I was down there, and I tried out one of those VR backpacks. This one was made by Zotac, and it's pretty much like a PC that you wear on your back. That way you have a little bit more freedom of movement, you don't have all these cables running around you. And it was hooked up to an HTC Vive with those 2 hand controllers. I was playing a shooting game, it was called something Arizona, and I was shooting zombies. I gotta say, it was not very immersive. I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it with those hand controllers. It seems like it tried to be immersive, but I was always reminded that I'm not in this VR space. It just felt like everything was numb, like I just can't feel anything. Even when I use those controllers to pick up stuff, it still felt like a game, it just didn't feel immersive at all. So I don't know, maybe you're a fan of that kind of VR, but for me personally, I kind of feel like VR has hit a brick wall right there, as far as like, hand controllers and, walking around a room goes. I do like VR experiences like Elite Dangerous where, you're in a cockpit or something, and so therefore you're not moving your hands around or anything, you just have your hands on controller. But I guess motion capture and hand movement based VR just isn't for me. But I did have one very, very good VR experience, and that was with the game Static, which is a PSVR title. So that also means I got to try out PSVR, and I like it. It's actually very comfortable. I could see myself owning something like that. But I really just need the price to go down, and I really just want a PS4 that has everything built into it. I mean, all the cables and everything sticking out with the VR box, that just looks stupid. It can't be like that forever. They have to make an improvement to that, and that's when I'll jump on board. But as for the game Static, it is probably one of the best ideas for VR I've ever heard. Here's what's going on. You wake up and you're like in the scientific testing facility. You don't know where you're at. You don't know why you're there. There's a scientist that's like observing you, but his face is all pixelated out. It's really unsettling. And your hands are in this big box, this thing that looks like an old polygraph machine from the 70s. It's got all these dials and meters and lights on it, and you don't know how it works. They don't give you a manual or anything. And it's basically like a big puzzle that you have to solve. But I gotta tell you, the person who was having the most fun was the developer. While the people demoing his game were trapped in this VR headset and trying to solve this puzzle, he had the biggest grin on his face while he was looking on, just studying them, just figuring out what they're trying to do, what their thought process is. And then it dawned on me, he is the scientist in the game. In real life, he is the guy who's there monitoring you and like checking up on you and see how you're doing. He didn't notice that I took this video of him, but it was such a thrill to see a developer just enjoying his own work like that. And guess what? When I got my turn to try it out, I actually completed the puzzle. I solved it. He was really happy that I was able to solve it, and he even interviewed me afterwards. So I might actually appear in an ad for his game. And if so, you guys will finally get a face reveal brought to you by Static. So yeah, that was a great game, and it's a beautiful concept for a VR title. Everyone who gets PSVR needs to try it out. That will go down as one of my favorite memories of PAX South ever. And now on to my opinions about the Nintendo Switch. I tried it out with Zelda Breath of the Wild, and so I was able to play it with both the Joy-Con and in like portable mode with the controllers attached to the tablet part. It's actually a lot more comfortable than I thought it would be. I thought that the controls would be really awkward because I've never seen a controller that has the buttons and the analog sticks, right there in tandem, right? One right below the other. But it actually works just fine. It seems that like that little part of your thumb that arches when you're hitting that B button, that's where like the analog stick fits under. So I never really had a problem right there. But my biggest concern, of course, was the D-pad, or the lack of a D-pad, of course. I hate the Chinese D-pad, and it seems like Nintendo thinks that's a good replacement for it. I can tell you right now, it is not an adequate substitute. You shouldn't be able to touch your thumb in between the directional buttons right there. And no, of course I didn't play any games that had movement mapped to the D-pad. For Zelda, all it did was switch your weapons. But it just doesn't feel right. I think some people are going to be able to cope with it, but a lot of people are not going to like playing classic titles on that. But at the same time, I find it really hard to fault Nintendo for that because we live in like a post-D-pad world. We have an entire generation of people who have grown up with only analog sticks, really. So to them, it's usually an exception to the rule when a game does use the D-pad. So I don't think it's really going to get in the way of a lot of Switch games, but again, it's something that I just don't like. Another thing I should say is that the Switch is smaller than I thought it would be. But for a portable, that's a good thing. So it's not pocketable, but it's not going to be a hassle to move around either. Also, the build quality seems really good. It's very sturdy, and the Joy-Cons, they have like a nice click when they go into place. I was afraid they would feel very flimsy because it is a 3-piece handheld, and even my WikiPad feels a little flimsy with the tablet in there. But no, it felt just like you would expect a Nintendo product to feel. I also want to tell you that while I was demoing Zelda, they had a really weird photo rule. They said that we could get photos, but the booth worker had to take the photo for us, and we had to be in it. So I thought that was really strange. We couldn't take photos of the Switch just by itself. Now as for Zelda Breath of the Wild, that is an incredible game. I'm not a Zelda fan, but even I was pretty impressed by it. That game is going to be getting 9 and 10 out of 10s all week long, you don't worry about that. The control of Link reminded me a lot of like Ico and Shadow of the Colossus. It felt very intuitive, but it did have a few problems with like the third person perspective. The camera did get turned around on me once and the controls kind of went backwards, so I had to like stop and wait for the camera to reorient itself so I could keep moving. Another thing that I noticed is that your movement also depends on whether you're holding a weapon. Like, I was holding this heavy battle axe, and when you're holding that, it kind of switches into almost like a tank-like control, like the camera will want to stay behind you. And that's a good thing if you're trying to target enemies, so I see why they did that. Otherwise, if you don't have anything equipped and you're just running around, the camera has a lot more free movement to it. Another thing I have to tell you is that it seems to be intended to be primarily a portable system. I started by playing Breath of the Wild on the big screen, and I'm not a graphics snob, but instantly I could tell that the characters had a lot of pixelation around them. Also a lot of textures in the environment, like rocks, they seemed to look very muddy even when they were up close. But a lot of those problems, especially the pixelation, they went away after I had the unit in handheld mode. So again, I know that they're going for like this hybrid console thing, but it seems like it was designed to be a handheld first and then a home console. In fact, I'm going to make a prediction. Give it some time and I think we're going to see Switch bundles that do not include the dock. Now as to whether I will buy a Switch, the answer is no. I am interested in the Switch, I think it is going to succeed, but it doesn't have the software support that I want right now. Again, I'm not a big Zelda fan, and also I need a D-pad, and let me tell you, every portable Nintendo system has always had another revision that was better than the first. And so that's what I'm waiting for, and I know it's going to take some time. Another thing is that I would not go into a Switch right now without someone else. From what I saw there at the booth, it seems that the best titles are co-op, especially Snipper Clips. I really wanted to try that one, but I just didn't have the time to wait in line again. So you see, I would only buy into a Switch with either a girlfriend or a roommate, someone who would be into it with me, because I think that that's where you're going to get the most enjoyment out of it. So there you go. I think the Switch is great, but I'm just not going to buy it day one. And I like it that I tried out the Switch over there because I was actually on the fence as to whether I wanted to get a Switch or not. But now that I've already tried it, it's out of my system now, so I don't really care about getting it on day one or anything. I don't have that fear of missing out that I had in my head before. Oh, and one last thing about the Switch, do not buy Bomberman. Over at the booth, they could not get people to play Bomberman. People who did try it were not having fun. You could just see in their faces it was not a good game, and some of the ones who actually tried it were telling me the same thing. When you have an empty table with 4 Nintendo Switches there and you still can't get people to come over and try it, you know something's wrong. Even the booth employees had to come over and start playing it so that people weren't playing alone. So yeah, steer clear of that, at least wait for reviews to come in. So that was my experience at PAX South this year. It was also very productive for my channel. I went to a lot of panels that were interesting and they also had very good advice for me. So overall, the experience was awesome and I can't wait for next year. I hope to see some of you over there next year too. But that's all I have for today. My throat is killing me, so I will see you next time with a review of the Xperia Play.